Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the government shutdown heads into a second week with no deal in sight. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries challenges Speaker Mike Johnson to a debate over the shutdown, while the White House warns lawmakers that the country will lose about $15 billion a week if the government doesn't reopen. Luis Eduardo Martinez with the latest from Capitol Hill. The White House pushing back as Democratic officials in Illinois and Oregon intensify efforts to block President Trump's National Guard deployments. And what the president tells NTD amid a surge in attacks on ICE agents across the country. City property is now off limits to ICE in Chicago. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says some federal agents have bounties on them. Jason Blair has more. The Supreme Court hears two cases today as it gears up for its new term. The court is expected to hear cases that could impact major constitutional issues. The High Court also tosses out multiple cases, including a bid by Ghislaine Maxwell to overturn her sex trafficking conviction.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. The government has been shut down for 6 days. The Senate is trying again to vote on the Democratic and Republican proposal to reopen the government. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has the latest on the story.
What we did, because Republicans are in charge of both houses right now, is the responsible thing. Leader Thune in the Senate and I in the House, we sat down with our appropriators and we said, let's come up with a simple stopgap measure to keep the lights on and keep the government open so that appropriators can finish this very healthy process.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson held a press conference this morning to outline the Republican strategy for the government funding battle, pass a stopgap bill with no partisan provisions, and allow for Congress to finish a full appropriations process.
Reopen the government, pass a spending bill that actually improves the quality of life of the American people in an environment where the cost of living is already too high.
Democratic leadership insists that the solution to the impasse is to pass Democratic policy priorities, which include repealing parts of the Republican reconciliation bill and also extending healthcare tax credits from the COVID era.
There's nothing for us to negotiate. The House has done its job. The House Republicans right now are working hard in their districts all around the country. We have one plea and one plea alone. We need a handful of Democrats to stop the madness, reopen the government so that we can get to these critical debates about the year-end policy decisions with regard to the further reforms to health care.
The White House has warned lawmakers that reductions in force of the federal government could begin this week if Congress does not manage to fund government.
And any government worker that loses their job because of rifts after another failed attempt to negotiate is going to be really there because the Democrats are being intransigent.
Approximately 750,000 federal employees have been furloughed, and many more, such as active duty military personnel, Border Patrol agents, and TSA, are working without pay. The American economy is also hurting.
Costs the U.S. GDP about $15 billion a week for a shutdown, or about 0.1% of GDP. And so if the shutdown continues for a long time, then there are going to be a lot of things that don't happen, and it will show up in the GDP number.
The Senate is prepared to vote for a fifth time this afternoon on the continuing resolution proposed by Republicans to reopen government. Thus far, only 3 Democrats have joined Republicans in this effort. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
President Trump defending his deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago and Portland as a legal battle unfolds. He tells NTD that attacks on ICE officers are part of a criminal insurrection and will face severe consequences. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. What is the president saying tonight about Chicago and Portland?
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So as we're seeing a surge in attacks on ICE agents, President Trump told NTD today that he believes that such attacks are part of a criminal insurrection, adding that the attackers will be severely punished. He also defends his recent deployment of National Guard troops to cities like Chicago and Portland, saying that he has no choice but to help save these cities. Watch. Secretary Noem saying that some of these attackers are actually organized and they're planning to kill and ambush these officers. What are the consequences for these?
Very severe. We're going to have very severe. We're going to find out who's going after our federal agents, whether it's National Guard or the military or anybody. I mean, if women raped and beaten and knocked to hell, and the same with men where they're being shot all over the place in large numbers, it's going to be lost if you don't do it. We have no choice but to do this.
Meanwhile, Tiff, a legal showdown is now unfolding as city officials and local leaders in Oregon and Illinois today sued the Trump administration over its decision to send in National Guards from other states. We know that a judge on Sunday blocked the administration's attempt to send in National Guard troops from other states into Portland, but the administration has now filed an emergency appeal trying to stay the judge's decision to let the deployment proceed and insisting that President Trump does have the authority to send in National Guard troops where he sees necessary. And meanwhile, as we're seeing the surge in attacks on ICE, for example, the past weekend in Chicago, where we saw 10 vehicles boxing in ICE agents and another one ramming into an ICE vehicle. White House official, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller told NTD today that he believes that this is part of an organized domestic terrorism attempt.
To what extent does the administration believe that such attacks are organized?
As I've said repeatedly, this is organized domestic terrorism. So when you have a 10-car ramming attack with armed attackers clearly intending to murder ICE officers in the conduct of their duties, what else can you call that?
And meanwhile, President Trump today said that he will invoke the Insurrection Act, though he hasn't yet. But if judges and local officials continue to hold up and impede the administration's efforts to make cities safe, he will actually invoke the Insurrection Act to help quell them. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. The Chicago mayor creates ICE-free zones with a new executive order. It effectively bars federal immigration agents from operating on any city-owned property. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more on that and other Homeland Security updates.
City property and unwilling private businesses will no longer serve as staging grounds for these raids.
Any city property in Chicago is now considered an ICE-free zone, according to an executive order signed by Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson.
Our libraries are not for ICE to prepare for a raid. Our parks are not for ICE to set up checkpoints. They are for Chicagoans to play and enjoy. Private establishments can partner with us to make it clear that private property is private property, and ICE cannot enter establishments without a valid warrant.
The Trump administration responded to Mayor Johnson's move, calling it a, quote, betrayal of law-abiding citizens, and it's, quote, shielding the most depraved, violent criminal, illegal aliens from justice. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem told Fox and Friends on Sunday that certain federal agents and officers have bounties on them.
They've released their pictures, they've sent them between their networks, and it's an extremely dangerous situation. This isn't just about, protesting free speech or that they don't like that people out here are upholding the law of our country. They're actually going out there and saying, kill these people and we'll give you this much money to do it.
And one independent journalist who's been covering the activity outside of an ICE facility in Portland said that she was given a rather disturbing so-called gift. She said that, quote, a young man in black approached me with this and asked me to wear it. It's a black button that appears to be from Antifa that has her nickname on it with an expletive and shows someone throwing a punch, knocking a person into the air. The White House has been condemning the consistent reports of threats and violence happening outside of the ICE facility in Portland.
For more than 100 days, night after night after night, the ICE facility has been really under siege by these anarchists outside. They have been disrespecting law enforcement. They've been inciting violence. We saw, again, a guillotine rolled out in front of this federal building.
Jason Blair, NTD News.
Should President Trump deploy the National Guard to cities with higher crime rates? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Your thoughts on President Trump's decision to send in the National Guards to several different cities in the U.S.?
I feel like he's looking out for the best interest of the city as well as the state and the State of the Union.
Every place got their own flaws and troubles. I don't think it calls for a National Guard. You need people to know communities and know environments that's from those environments and communities to get it together. You don't need people from the outside because they don't understand it.
You know what? If he believes that that's what we need to do, I'm for it because I think it's getting out of hand. Did you see that they bombed that bus over there in Portland because they thought it was an ICE bus instead of, an ice cube bus? It's getting out of hand. I really think they need to reel it in.
And just over the weekend, Chicago saw 5 people shot dead and 24 people injured from shootings all across the city. I guess my question here would be, do you think this level of violence justifies some level of, police patrol?
Absolutely. The police in that particular state and city should take control of that, but apparently some of them don't.
Well, it certainly justifies something. They say crime is down 30% in Chicago, yet they're still taking 200, 300, 400 lives a year through gun violence.
The left party, they need to reel it in a little bit. They really do. They need to call out for safety. They need to call out for reasonable judgment. They don't seem to have that right now. They're like unhinged.
It's just a bigger city, so it's going to have more deaths, more violence, more everything,
So you think it's to be expected in a big city?
Yeah, it's to be expected. I mean, it's the way America is right now. America is violent.
We're hearing this from a lot of people, right? People are saying that, crime is to be expected in big cities. So do you think people are becoming kind of desensitized to these kinds of things?
Yes. 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't as bad. I grew up in Chicago, and it wasn't near as bad as it is now.
Crime shouldn't be expected. Imagine a world where, it's not normal to have somebody just carjack your car, and instead of the police helping you out, they tell you, oh, we can't do anything until they're done with the vehicle. Here, have an Apple tag to see if you can find your vehicle.
In America, you should be able to do whatever you want to do within the law. To be attacked just for walking down the street, to be carjacked just for driving along, you shouldn't have to live in fear.
As the Chicago mayor declares city spaces as ICE-free zones, what message does this send, and what kind of offenders might the city end up harboring? Tune into NTD's Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to hear our panel debate with Democratic strategist and former U.S. Representative Bob McEwen. The Supreme Court returned to the bench today to hear arguments on 2 procedural cases, one that could impact the right to counsel. But what more compelling issues can we expect in the days and weeks ahead? NTD's Arlene Richards previews the 2025 to 2026 Supreme Court term.
Following a busy summer, the Supreme Court returned to the bench on Monday for the start of the 2025-2026 term. This term, the court will decide major cases affecting women's sports, presidential power, voting rights, and more. On Monday, the court heard a pair of cases involving the Sixth Amendment right to counsel and whether state procedures can be applied to federal courts. Perhaps the most anticipated case is President Trump's tariffs. The court will hear 2 consolidated cases that challenge the president's power to impose sweeping global tariffs. President Trump invoked an emergency powers law to impose reciprocal tariffs on almost all countries, as well as levies on Canada, Mexico, and China over the trafficking of fentanyl into the United States. The challengers are a group of small businesses in 12 states who all claim that the president doesn't have the independent power to impose tariffs under the law, and that Congress didn't delegate that power under the emergency statute he's relying on. The lower courts agreed and ruled that Trump exceeded his authority. Legal scholar Professor Chad Scuteri said the law does empower the president to impose the challenged tariffs.
Since the founding, tariffs have been a traditional and well-known means of regulating foreign commerce, so the ordinary reading of the statutory phrase regulate importation encompasses the traditional power to regulate importation via tariffs.
He said the law allows the president to either investigate importation or prohibit importation. Here, he said Trump used his authority to regulate importation, which is in the middle of those 2 powers. The Supreme Court will hear arguments on November 5th. Several plaintiffs have challenged the president's power to remove officials from office. Lower courts have relied on a 90-year-old case to rule that Congress can set limits on the president's ability to remove certain officials. The justices have ruled on some emergency appeals, but they haven't issued a final ruling on how far Congress can go in limiting the president's removal power. Several states have created laws to ban transgender girls from participating in girls' sports. Two of those states, Idaho and West Virginia, are expected to appear before the Supreme Court this term to defend the legality of their policies. And the state of Louisiana will be back in court for another round in a fight over redistricting. The High Court previously declined to rule on whether the state's congressional map discriminated against a racial minority. The case will be heard on October 15th. Other cases scheduled for this term include lower court defiance, LGBT conversion therapy for minors, and a state's gun restriction law. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And as the High Court kicks off its new 9-month term, the justices have also turned away multiple cases. The High Court declined to hear Missouri's bid to revive a law intended to prevent enforcement of several federal gun laws in the state. The law from 2021 was backed by Republicans and declared that certain federal gun restrictions violate the Second Amendment. The Biden Justice Department challenged the law, and it was blocked in 2023. The Trump Justice Department urged the Supreme Court to decline to hear the case, although it no longer wants to fully bar its enforcement. In a separate case, the Supreme Court declined to hear Ghislaine Maxwell's bid to overturn her conviction in the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking case. The justices also tossed out other appeals by Russia's largest bank, Europe's largest software maker, as well as Live Nation. It's been over 6 months since Kash Patel took the helm of the FBI. Following his Senate confirmation in February, he pledged to let good cops be cops and to restore trust in the agency. In an interview airing tonight on NTD, Armstrong Williams sat down with Patel to discuss the Bureau's work, including Operation Summer Heat, which led to over 8,600 arrests. Among the many topics, Patel addressed January 6th National Guard authorizations and transparency with Congress, as well as the line between free speech and true threats. Tune in to the Armstrong Williams Show at 8 p.m. Eastern on NTD and Epic TV. Don't miss it. Coming up, Paramount acquires the Free Press for $150 million. The organization's founder, Barry Weiss, will become the editor-in-chief of Paramount's CBS News. The CCP is working to undermine the U.S. alliance with the Philippines with fake social media accounts. How Beijing's latest actions are heightening tensions between the U.S. and China, Jack Bradley reports. And the new French Prime Minister resigns after less than a month on the job. What he said was behind his decision and what's next for French politics when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. New developments at Paramount. The media company has acquired the Free Press and installed its founder, Barry Weiss, as the editor-in-chief of CBS News. CEO David Edelson welcomed Weiss to the organization. In a press release, he wrote, "I am confident her entrepreneurial drive and editorial vision will invigorate CBS News." Weiss founded the Free Press in 2021 after resigning from the New York Times in 2020. In her resignation letter, Weiss cited discrimination and a hostile work environment. The journalist also criticized the paper's editorial policies. Weiss wrote at the time, quote, "Stories are chosen and told in a way to satisfy the narrowest of audiences rather than to allow a curious public to read about the world and then draw their own conclusions." In a statement today, Weiss called the new agreement a testament to the vision of Paramount's new leaders. According to a report by Reuters, the Chinese Communist Party is running fake social media accounts impersonating Filipinos and paying off their officials and influencers, all to drive a wedge between the U.S. and the island nation. NTD's Washington, Jack Bradley has the details.
Don't believe everything you see on social media. The Chinese Communist Party is leading an operation to start up fake Facebook and X accounts and pay off social media influencers in an effort to weaken the U.S. alliance with the Philippines, among others. That's according to a new report from Reuters, which reviewed internal documents from a Chinese-owned marketing company based in the Philippines called Infinitus. Authorities in the Philippines also say Infinitus was paid by the CCP to start hundreds of fake accounts posing as Filipino writers and create anti-American content. This issue came under the spotlight back in April by former top Philippine official Francis Tolentino. He accused Infinitus of being paid by the Chinese embassy to spread pro-CCP propaganda.
They manufacture fake social media content against the Philippine government's policy, pretending to be motivated about concerns about peace in the region and manipulate and ultimately destroy the Philippines' ability to oppose China.
But it goes further than that. One report from November 2024 found that this army of social media trolls pushed a video condemning the U.S. deploying missiles to the Philippines. The accounts also pushed pro-CCP posts by dozens of Filipino media personalities, all of whom received awards from the Association of Philippines-China Understanding, which is an agency set up by the former Philippine President Gloria Arroyo and a CCP agency, all of which the U.S. is accused of co-opting subnational governments. The Philippines is a strategic location for Washington and Beijing, for that matter, due to its close proximity to Taiwan. The CCP has threatened to invade Taiwan by 2027, to which the U.S. has promised to defend its interests. But U.S. officials say that this may lead to an economic depression worldwide. In the last few years, China has become increasingly aggressive in this region, with CCP military vessels ramming Philippine Coast Guard vessels, as well as firing water cannons at them and even blocking them from carrying out resupply missions. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
After less than a month on the job, French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has resigned. Lecornu made the announcement today, just hours after unveiling his new cabinet. Lecornu blamed endless party divisions and egos in Parliament. Both the left and right blasted his cabinet as a betrayal of his promise for change. Markets fell as plans for tomorrow's budget vote collapsed. Political scientists say it's now up to President Emmanuel Macron to decide whether to dissolve Parliament or call for new presidential elections. Coming up, talks between Israel and Hamas for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip have begun in Egypt. Meanwhile, the two sides continue fighting as the negotiations take place. Jason Perry with the update. Russia welcomes President Trump's agreement to extend a key nuclear arms treaty. Arian Pazdar has the details on that. And on another issue, which Moscow says could destroy Russia's relations with the U.S. when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump says he welcomes Russia's suggestion to extend a key nuclear arms treaty. Moscow supports the plan, but warns that U.S.-Russia relations could be destroyed over a separate issue. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the update.
President Putin offered to keep limits on nuclear arms for one more year to then hopefully negotiate a new treaty. Sounds like a good idea to me.
President Trump calls it a good idea to extend a nuclear arms agreement with Russia for 1 year. Last month, Russia offered to maintain limits which are capping the size of the world's two biggest nuclear arsenals. Those limits were first set out in the New START Accord in 2010. It's set to expire in February, if not extended. The Kremlin on Monday said it still supports the idea after Trump's statement.
Of course, we welcome such a statement. We believe that this already gives grounds for optimism that the United States will support this initiative of President Putin.
But tensions between Washington and Moscow are rising over a separate issue. Ukraine is seeking Tomahawk missiles from the US, which could hit Moscow if fired from Ukraine. Washington is still deciding whether to send Kyiv those missiles or not. Russian President Vladimir Putin now says supplying Kyiv with Tomahawk missiles would destroy Russia-US relations.
I have already said that this will lead to the destruction of our relations, or at least the positive trends that have emerged in these relations.
The request by Ukraine came after multiple reported violations of NATO airspace by Russia. NATO members Germany, Belgium, Poland, Estonia and Romania all report recent incursions. Some of them directly blame Russia. And just on Monday, air traffic was suspended in Lithuania's main airport. That's because of balloons in its airspace. Flights had to be diverted in yet another disruption to aviation in the NATO airspace. The Kremlin on Monday said there is no reason to blame Russia for the recent incursions, denying any involvement. After the reported incursion on Monday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the Prime Minister of Lithuania. He says the two discussed further defense assistance, joint weapons production and investments in the Ukrainian defense industry. Earlier in the day, Zelensky met with the Dutch Prime Minister as Kyiv aims to expand funding for weapons. Zelensky thanked European NATO members for their support. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
In the Middle East, talks between Israel and Hamas have begun in Egypt on President Trump's peace plan for the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israeli troops and Hamas terrorists continue to fight in Gaza as the talks take place. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
On Monday, high-stakes talks between Israel and the Hamas terrorist group began in the city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Hamas recently agreed to release all 48 remaining hostages, the living and deceased, when they responded to President Trump's plan to end the war in the Gaza Strip. However, Hamas did not agree to all parts of the plan. And according to a statement from Hamas, the group is now seeking clarity on the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza and the ceasefire, among other things. And in an interview on Euronews, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explained that the Gaza peace plan has two parts.
The first part is releasing all the hostages. Israel makes a tactical withdrawal, stays in Gaza. And then the second part is meant to demilitarize Gaza and disarm Hamas. That will be negotiated.
The White House said that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are also in Egypt for the talks. President Trump gave an update on Sunday evening.
The countries of the world, a lot of the countries surrounding Israel, frankly, Muslim, Arab, and many others, have had great meetings with Hamas, and it looks like it's working. So we'll wait for a little while, see how it all turns out.
And in a post on Truth Social, Trump said he was told that the first phase of the Gaza peace plan, which includes releasing all hostages, should be completed this week. The negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza come on the eve of the 2-year anniversary of the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. Some residents in Israel held a ceremony at one of the villages Hamas terrorists attacked on that day.
This is the second time we stand here marking the day when everything fell apart. And the hostages are here a few steps away, yelling while no one can hear them. 731 days. For us, it's 2 years. For them, it's forever.
And on the same day, Israel said they located a stockpile of weapons in Gaza City, which included explosives, radios, ammunition magazines, and numerous weapons. And the Israeli Air Force said a terrorist squad fired a mortar at Israeli troops, injuring one soldier. Israel's Air Force then struck the terrorist, who they said posed an immediate threat to troops in the area. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And joining us now to discuss the latest developments in the Middle East is foreign policy and national security analyst Armen Kurdian. He's also a retired U.S. Navy captain and a candidate for state senate in California. Armen, thank you so much for joining us. Always good to see you. Now that indirect talks are underway in Egypt, where are we in terms of the negotiations and what are you watching out for here?
Hi, Tiffany. So there's a bit of a dynamic going on here. The war's been going on for 2 years, and Netanyahu is under immense pressure at home to bring these hostages home. We already know this. He's also under political pressure. This has been very, very costly. A lot of dollars, a lot of time and material going into it. So Hamas is going to take this into consideration. They're going to say, okay, Netanyahu is maybe, we think he's in a little bit of a corner. Maybe we're going to press in some of the terms that are being laid out here. And perhaps they may play hardball on some of the terms that were laid out by Trump and Netanyahu with Hamas, for example, that they need to fully disarm, that Hamas cannot have any part in future governance. So are they going to do this? It's entirely possible. As I've said, it's going to require a lot of external pressure from the rest of the Arab leaders to bring Hamas to bear to say, look, you need to take this deal, because it was almost unthinkable a few months ago, but Israel is basically offering them, if you surrender, give up your weapons, agree not to fight, there will be total amnesty and we're not going to prosecute you. I mean, that is a far step forward for Israel. So how much Hamas is going to try to play what it may correctly or incorrectly perceive as an advantage, we'll have to see by tomorrow or the next day.
Now, President Trump said while he expects the negotiations to take a couple of days, he urged negotiators to move fast. Now, this follows his warning to Hamas last week that the group would face complete obliteration if they insist on staying in power. What do you see as the U.S. or more directly President Trump's role in getting the two sides to these indirect talks?
Well, Trump has not been shy about criticizing both sides in this actual conflict. He asked for Israel to stop fighting, but Israel is continuing to attack, as we've seen. Let's not forget that a lot of the reports, which originally thought were true and then not true, turned out to be somewhat true, actually, in terms of aid that's being stolen within Gaza, whether it's actual Hamas terrorists or other gangs. Because anytime you see something with the UN marking on it or U.S. marking on it being sold in a marketplace, it's been stolen. It's on a black market. So whether we make progress is going to depend on. It's really going to depend a lot on, again, Iran as Hamas's benefactor, providing them money and funds. The other wealthy Arabs or folks around the world that are providing indirect funds and support for them, and perhaps something which we haven't seen, which I was kind of hoping that we would have been doing for a while, is engaging a little bit more of a psychological operation warfare with the Gazan people, with the Palestinians, to continue to push this message into the Gaza Strip that's saying, hey, Hamas is not your friend. They're not your benefactor. They are, in fact, your oppressor. They're the ones who are causing all of your death and destruction. I don't know that that's been happening. That's something that I think is going to be sorely missed, because we may still see a lot of resolve on the part of the Gazans on Hamas not to take this and to continue the fight.
Now, President Trump's peace plan calls for the return of all 48 hostages, dead or alive. Now, Hamas has pushed back, according to reports, calling it unrealistic, as some of the deceased are believed to be buried under rubble. Meanwhile, in New York, weekly marches hosted by the New York Hostages and Missing Families Forum were optimistic on the return of the hostages. How are you reading the hostage release part of the plan? How likely are we to see all of them return, both dead or alive?
Well, let's put it this way. If they are, in fact, buried under rubble, some of them are, which would be absolutely tragic, then it's a good bet Hamas would know what pile of rubble they happen to be buried under. So they need to release all the ones who are alive, the ones who are dead that they have, and then they just say, at the very least, this is where this individual probably is under this rubble. If it's a small handful, then Israel might accept that. If it's, say, half of them, then I don't think that anybody's going to believe that that's actually the case. This is what Hamas was hoping for when they stole these people 2 years ago, that this would be their bargaining chip, because they knew that Israel was going to come in, that they were going to attack, and that this was going to be their get-out-of-jail-free card, or their one bulwark in terms of perhaps a negotiated or some kind of end to the conflict. I'm not even going to use the term negotiated peace, because I don't know that Hamas was looking for anything like that at the outset. So this has been very, very purposeful. Israel did the right thing to going after them. So there really can't be any daylight in returning all these hostages. These people need to come home. If they don't come home en masse, then there's going to be no peace.
In terms of unrest, tomorrow, of course, is the second anniversary of October 7th. What would you say has been the war's impact on, say, U.S.-Israel foreign policy first?
Well, I think you've seen that in terms of U.S. standing by Israel, especially when it came to Israel's defense with Hamas, these rockets, with Iran's attack on Israel, with the U.S. attack on the Iranian nuclear strike. Netanyahu himself said that the people of Israel have never had a better friend or a better ally than Donald Trump in the White House, which I think is probably very true. Going forward, what do the rest of the Arab leaders, what does the rest of the Middle East see in terms of U.S.-Israeli relations? Certainly, they don't like the destruction that's going on in Gaza, but at the same time, they all know privately that Iran has been the benefactor of all these proxies. They understand, even though they don't really say that quiet part out loud, that Iran has been the great destabilizer in the Middle East. A lot of them, I still believe, have been using the Palestinian question as a red herring. I don't know that they necessarily really care about the Palestinian people, but they've been using that as a sort of a needle in Israel's eye, in the U.S.'s eye, while they don't actually do anything to solve the problem. And I think that's pretty obvious to a lot of the folks all over the world. But people still love to say the poor Palestinians, what are we going to do with them, when, in fact, it is not Israel's fault that the Palestinians are in the situation that they are actually in right now. So going forward, if the U.S. can bring this conflict to an end, because even though Israel is obviously the much mightier force. And every now and then an Israeli soldier is killed in this conflict. And Israel values the lives of its citizens. One citizen more than 1,000 Palestinians. They value their lives. So bringing this to an end, getting the people home. If Trump gets involved, remember this war started under the previous administration. Never should have started in the first place. Never should have allowed Iran to be rich enough to reconstitute these proxies. So bringing it to an end will continue to strengthen the relationship.
And with tomorrow being October 7th, we have seen anti-Israel activists announce mass rallies to flood New York. Are you at all concerned that some of these situations could escalate?
Oh, certainly. There will be professional agitators in these crowds, just like we've seen. There will be a lot of Jew hatred in these crowds. You'll see a lot of anti-Israeli rhetoric, anti-U.S. rhetoric, anti-capitalism, anti-free market rhetoric. These people don't need a reason to go out and protest and express their disdain for democracy and free markets. And frankly, this is being seen as the face of the far left progressive movement. Things like this are a big reason why Donald Trump is in office, because a lot of folks reject this kind of absolute hatred. We're going to have to see what's going to happen with these protests if they continue. But there's always violence. There's always agitation. There's attacks on law enforcement. That seems to be in the in thing to do these days. And a lot of elected leaders even calling for protests and resistance against federal law enforcement, which I'm sure they don't really discriminate between federal, local, and state police, no matter where they are. So it's unfortunate and it's sad, and it's just going to require the rest of us to stand more united and more together in the spirit of freedom and democracy and free markets.
Well, Armin Kurdian, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Coming up, chipmaker AMD is partnering with the parent company of ChatGPT. They say the deal will help power the next generation of AI infrastructure. David Lamb has more on the announcement. And Brightline West faces rising costs on its Las Vegas to Southern California high-speed rail project. The company now needs billions more to keep its 2028 Olympic deadline on track. Christina Corona has the details after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A major chip maker is partnering with OpenAI, creator of ChatGPT. The company say the deal will help them advance the artificial intelligence ecosystem. NTD's David Lamb has more.
Advanced Micro Devices, better known as AMD, announced a multi-year partnership on Monday with OpenAI. OpenAI will deploy 6 gigawatts of GPUs from AMD, which will power OpenAI's next-generation artificial intelligence infrastructure. AMD says its high-performance systems and the partnership will enable large-scale AI developments, advancing the entire AI ecosystem. Sam Altman, co-founder and CEO of OpenAI, said this partnership is a major step in building the compute capacity needed to realize AI's full potential. AMD is also giving OpenAI the option to buy up to 160 million shares of AMD, whose stock value increased over 23% on Monday. This comes as some governments and industries are in an AI development race. In September, Albania introduced its first AI-powered government minister named Diela. Along with trends and new developments in AI, a number of people have expressed concerns and skepticism towards the AI shift. A Pew Research survey in September found that 57% of U.S. adults say the risk of AI for society is high. While some people see gains in efficiency, others say AI erodes human abilities and connections. AMD will deploy the first gigawatt of capacity to OpenAI in the second half of 2026. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
The anticipated high-speed rail linking Las Vegas to Southern California just got a lot more expensive. The company Brightline West is seeking an extra $6 billion to keep the project moving forward as costs continue to climb. NTD's Christina Corona has the details.
Brightline West is asking for an additional $6 billion to complete its high-speed rail line connecting Las Vegas to Southern California. The project's total cost has jumped more than 30%, climbing from $16 billion to $21.5 billion, according to a new report from the U.S. Department of Transportation. The request comes as California's own high-speed rail project faces setbacks, losing $4 billion in federal funding under the Trump administration earlier this year. Back in February, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy praised Brightline West, calling its plan impressive compared to the, quote, slow progress of California's high-speed rail project. When complete, the rail line will feature 7-car trains that carry up to 450 passengers and make the Vegas to LA trip in under 2 hours. Travelers can expect free Wi-Fi, ADA accessibility, onboard dining, and hotel check-in services. The 218-mile rail service will operate from Las Vegas, Nevada to Rancho Cucamonga, California. The Rancho Cucamonga stop will link to Metrolink's regional rail system, providing connections to stations across Los Angeles, Riverside, Orange, San Diego, and Ventura counties. Brightline CEO Mike Reininger says the company needs more funding due to rising labor and material costs driven by inflation. The project is on track for completion by summer 2028, just in time for the Los Angeles Olympics. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.